Okay, we have a quorum, so may we all rise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Do we have a motion to go into closed session?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to go into closed session to consider confidential personnel information protected under GS 143-318.11 A1, A3, and A6, and 115C-319 to consult with an attorney employed or retained by the board in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in GS 143-318.11 A3, to establish or give instructions concerning the board's negotiating position related to a potential acquisition of real property as provided in GS 143-318.11 A5, and to consider confidential student information protected under GS 115C-402 and the Family Educational and Privacy Rights Act 20 U.S. Code 1232G.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no? Likewise? No. Okay, we are now back into open session, and we'll now hear comments from Dr. Merrill.
Thank you. We begin tonight's meeting on a somber note as we remember Dr. James Hedrick, principal of Athens Drive High School, who passed away unexpectedly this morning. Dr. Hedrick was a dedicated educator and family man who served as principal at Green Hope High for 9 years before becoming principal at Athens Drive High in 2014. We hold him and his family in our thoughts, including his wife, Camille, principal of Panther Creek High School, and those at Athens Drive and beyond whose lives he touched. He will be greatly missed. Today was an important day of learning for our principals, assistant principals, and many central service support staff. It was the opening day of our 2016 Summer Leadership Conference. Our strategic plan was front and center throughout the day as our school leaders continued to strengthen their understanding of what it means to incorporate the 4 C's into their daily routines. From opening comments to dozens of breakout sessions, our focus on the strategic plan underscores how it's becoming a guiding document for daily classroom learning. No single activity can accurately capture the breadth of this work, but individual examples do help us tell the story. With that in mind, I'd like to share this video featuring Chris Tuttle, a technology teacher at Washington Magnet Elementary, who had students collaborate on the production of a puppet show and related math project.
So today the project that we worked on was having the kids come together and actually do 2 phases of the project, where we had some kids finishing up doing their puppetry and embedding our literature into the project. And then we had other kids that are moving on to the math part of our project and working in collaborative groups to focus on area and perimeter and build the next phase of their 3 Little Pigs homes that they have done through the regions of North Carolina. This is our green screen area, and so what we do is the kids do a variety of different things. We have an iPad stand here so that they can film, and they can use different things like puppets. They also can film backgrounds. And we have different kinds. We have our giant green screen, and then we also have little portable green screens that they can use for their puppet shows. And then they put it all together on the iPad using the Doing app. So this section here is set up for the kids to collaborate on their area and perimeter project. So they'll use the different items in the tub as well as the pencils and the cards to get things together and take pictures of their work and then compare them. So this section right here is our collaboration station, and it's meant to be for collaborative learning. So there's 4 seats and they can drag other seats around. They have a wireless keyboard so that they can move the keyboard around as they're working. Typically students in this station are using Google Drive and Google Docs and collaborating together and looking at what they're doing on this monitor. This is another example of where we have some collaborative spaces. I think it's really important to have flexible space and flexible furniture that you can move around so that the kids can come together and collaborate and talk about what they're doing. This learning is really important as you're thinking about working with the students and trying to reach all the learners in the classroom. Having them to be able to come into spaces like this that are flexible and open and allow for all those different skills to shine is important. Also, having the kids to see the curriculum in a different way and see how relevant it is to their learning is important as well, because the skills that we are trying to build for them to go out into the world and use are the skills of communication and critical thinking and creativity and collaboration. So it's important to try to take that and bring it back into the classroom and provide opportunities for the students to be able to show those skills.
Thanks to all the teachers who helped bring our strategic plan to life in our classrooms. This 2016 Summer Leadership Conference concludes tomorrow. Concludes my remarks.
Thank you. I do indeed like the shirts, as I told our staff that I would like a black shirt to wear under a nice pink blazer as well. But again, if you don't follow, which I think most of you follow, our Twitter handle, there were lots of great tweets from several of our participants in the leadership retreat today. So if you have a moment, it's worth taking a look at some of the comments that they were posting. It's always a great pleasure. I appreciate the videos. I think I say that every time. But most importantly, in this one, it also showed that she used the word of this is our collaborative space, which is quite relative in the way that they were actually creative in moving around a single desk and making that a collaborative space. So again, just a reminder how innovative our teachers are to make it work in their classrooms regardless. I was just most recently in one of our elementary schools that's built a T-shaped stage in the middle of their elementary school that allows them to move around it, to stand on top of it, and to use it as a collaborative space. So again, it's always a great reminder of the innovation that we have in our school system. I will only have one remark, and I'll end here, in that to Dr. Merrill's point, I'm going to ask each of you at the end of your day when you're reflecting to hold dear in your thoughts to the Hendrick family that the sudden death. Many of you know he was here just a few months ago talking about our strategic plan and how they were implementing it at Athens Drive. And so this does impact 2 of our schools. And so I ask that you hold both of them and their entire family and their school communities in your hearts tonight. Thank you. Ms. Kushner, welcome back.
It's good to be back, and thank you for those thoughtful words. And we will definitely be thinking of the Hedrick family. It's good to be here, and I hope everyone's having a safe, happy summer.
I had the pleasure last week of going to Superior Tool in Wake Forest, one of our community's successful industrial operations. They, Mr. Robbie Earnhardt, who is the owner of the place, years ago started an apprenticeship program and affiliated with an organization called the North Carolina Triangle Apprenticeship Program that has several companies from Bueller Products to Superior Tool to, I think, GlaxoSmithKline and some others that are involved in helping high school students have a work experience and challenge them to consider that as a career choice as opposed to something else. And they had a graduation ceremony for the 3 students who had completed their junior year experience at Superior Tool. And they also had 3 other students who had completed their senior year experience at Superior Tool and were going on to Wake Tech to complete work in becoming a tool and die maker. It's interesting that this is the work product of the first year internship folks using an injection mold device, developing the software, the design, the pattern, testing it, revising it. This one happened to have been made by a student by the name of Stephen Pierce. And I had a chance to talk to some of the students, and I asked this once, I asked, where do you go to high school? He said, Holly Springs. I said, how did you get all the way out to Wake Forest? He said, my engineering teacher told me about this, and I wanted to. So I think that's an interesting thing. We don't talk much about the hands-on career technical educational programs that are vibrant within the school system. And we probably know less about the ones that industry is supporting. So that there's when I first started trying to find out about this relationship, that we have a better relationship with NCTAP than I was aware of, and I appreciate the work they're doing and the opportunities they're providing for our students to participate in this. Just as an aside, we have a building program at Wake Forest High School, and they're getting ready to build a tiny house. So imagine taking the functionality of a 2,000 square foot house and condensing it to a 600 or smaller square foot house that can be on wheels and then sold. So our young people are having a range of opportunities to explore different careers and that can meet their expectations and their aptitudes and give them some place where they can really grab hold and grow. And I appreciate that. I want to give a shout out to Mr. Earnhardt and his leadership at Superior Tooling and to the other folks with NCTAP for their work in helping our students develop the skills and find careers. Thank you very much.
Well, I just want to offer my sincere condolences to Dr. Camille Hedrick and the other members of Dr. James Hedrick's family and the school communities affected by that loss today. And it's just heavy on my heart at this moment. So that's all I have tonight. Thank you.
I'd like to do the same. I had the opportunity to work with Jim. He backfilled my position at Green Hope High School. And I've worked with him and Camille, and Jim and I taught next door to each other at NC State for a couple of years. He will be greatly missed.
Thank you. Glad to be back. And my thoughts and prayers also with the Hedrick family. Thank you.
So I too would like to add my sympathies and deepest condolences to the whole Hendrick family, the Athens family, as well as everybody who's been touched by them. Our thoughts and prayers are with the family. I'd also like to just briefly reflect on, well, first of all, I thank you to all those involved in the decision to shift the work session to go into this meeting so that we could attend the hearing at the federal court building today. We obviously don't have any direct say in such decisions, nor should we. But I have to reflect on language that I hear, and that is respect for voters. Because this whole confusion that was instigated seems to be exactly the opposite of that. I don't think it respected voters. It has created confusion that does not respect voters. And throughout this whole election process, I'd like to see us get back to respecting voters. The more independence we can get in districting decisions, particularly at the school level, it pains me to try to deal with our, as very much should be, nonpartisan race in a partisan election year. That's not the way schools should operate. So, again, just a brief reflection on the discussion, and it's time to respect voters, and that requires independence. That requires getting back to as logical a process as possible that allows voters to pay attention to schools without the noise of things like a presidential election year. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. And as Dr. Martin just mentioned, I want to remind everyone that today's work session was canceled, and those two topics from the work session, the Memorandum of Agreement with Wake Technical Community College, Cooperative Innovative Career and Technical Education High School in Northern Wake County, and the 2016-17 operating budget update and recommended adjustments to the local budget have been placed on tonight's agenda as information items only. And so at this time, I will entertain a motion to approve our amended agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please note by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. And I think it's important to note that we did not have public comment tonight, so we will move right into our information items. No one signed up. No one signed up. Right. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Ms. Parker.
Good evening. Thank you, Vice Chair Johnson-Hosmer, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to announce that the terms and conditions of a memorandum of agreement have now been reached with Wake Technical Community College to memorialize the desire for collaborative efforts to explore a proposed partnership between the board and Wake Tech to offer students technical programs that follow career and college promise programs. including cooperative innovative programs. These programs should prepare our high school students for both career and post-secondary opportunities. The parties desire to build upon the successful model of the Vernon Malone College and Career Academy with a location of a similar cooperative innovative school in northern Wake County in the facility that's recently been in use as the Wakefield High School 9th grade center. School students will be offered a comprehensive academic program meeting all of the school graduation requirements and University of North Carolina system entrance requirements. The initial Wake Tech faculty would be located on the high school campus and function as an integral part of the school. Use of the school facility could be shared with Wake Tech when not in use by the high school. As you may recall, we brought this before you in June to both your Student Achievement Committee, Facilities Committee, and this board for a Memorandum of Understanding to kick off the process. This document was developed collaboratively between the staffs of both organizations together with the current principal of the Vernon Malone Career and College Academy. So it gave us a real opportunity to reap the benefits of those best practices and lessons learned. So we feel like we have an improved agreement. Most of the changes have been to adjust for the locational differences. So it has been reviewed by Wake Tech's council and is in review with ours. Going forward, our next steps would be to bring this back to you for approval on the 16th. Also on the 16th in the work session, we've scheduled a presentation to discuss how our focus areas have been discussed and identified. So those will be presented to you in greater detail in the work session prior to this agreement coming forward. It will go to the Wake Tech Board of Trustees on the same day. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about any of the specific content of the memorandum. Any questions?
Thank you. I appreciate the innovative use of the space that we have and the continued partnership with Wake Tech. And I saw in the agreement, so they are going to be on a modified calendar that's similar to Wake Tech's calendar.
That's the intention. That's what will be. That's one of the benefits of the application for cooperative innovative status with DPI. So the intention is to get on a schedule similar to that of Vernon Malone that aligns with the Wake Tech schedule as much as possible.
And I just feel that I love opportunities to reinforce that for this calendar, our high school students are going to be done with their exams on their, before their winter break. It's a sound calendar for this sort of work. And if they continue at Wake Tech, they could go the next spring and be seamless. So it's good that we're able to work that into this agreement. Thank you.
Anticipated start of this school is next August?
Yes, sir. Fall of 2017.
Fall of 2017, okay. It'll take that long.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Joined by Ms. Terry Kimsey.
Good evening, Vice Chair Johnson Hostler, members of the board, and Superintendent Merrill. At your work session on July 19th, we reviewed the final state budget with you. We made one recommended addition to the board's proposed budget for 2016-17, and then we ran through a list of recommended adjustments to balance the budget. Today, we'd like to give you a quick update on something we've learned about employer benefit contribution rates that we've learned subsequent to your 19th meeting, and then very quickly review the one recommended addition and recommended adjustments, and then turn it over to the board for them to discuss the recommended addition and adjustments. So the new information came to us from the Department of Public Instruction on July 22nd. We had mentioned to you on the 19th that there was the chance that in January the retirement health insurance rate would go up. We were basically instructed on the 22nd by DPI, go ahead and you need a budget for that now. So what we know now, the retirement rate we need to budget for the year is 16.33%. The health insurance rate, even though it's currently $5,471, we need to budget $56.59. I will mention that again, for state-funded employees, the state covers those benefit costs. It's only for locally funded employees. And for using the example of a teacher, we're a state-funded teacher receives a local salary supplement that is subject to retirement, so that is borne by the district. The change in rates when compared to the proposed budget has an $840,000 impact, additional funding required. That being said, we believe we have a plan to balance it. We also learned from DPI at the same conference that the anticipated state fines and forfeiture revenues are coming in higher. So between that and an assessment we'll perform of all of our carry forward balances, we believe we have that covered, and this does not change the recommended adjustments we presented to you 2 weeks ago. Just wanted to give you that update, though. So that brings us back to what we recommended as an addition 2 weeks ago, and we came to you and proposed adding a business case to the proposed budget to provide a 1.5% locally funded increase for support staff. Those are our bus drivers, our child nutrition workers, our teaching assistants, clerical staff in the schools, everybody else that's the backbone underneath our core business. We had estimated in our initial budget that the state would legislate a 3% increase for these staff. That did not happen. The state came in with a 1.5% increase. When we look at what that would do with the state 1.5%, it would be back at what we thought would be the 3% for these very important staff. We look at our neighbors, so to speak, Wake County government employees, City of Raleigh employees. Many have the same sorts of jobs as our support staff. They're receiving 3 and 3.25% increases this year. And we also look at the consecutive years since 2009-10 that these very staff have received no or very small, with the exception of last year, recurring increases, but rather some one-time bonuses that either we were able to afford locally or that the state legislated. So, and again, we made the decision when we proposed this to you 2 weeks ago that the continued balancing of the budget by impacting this group of employees is not aligned with our strategic plan in evaluating these employees. We shared with you, and the number hasn't changed, the estimate for that is just under $3 million to invest back into our employees for that additional locally funded 1.5% increase. That brought us to a $17.5 million funding gap. Other state adjustments or adjustments needed with the final state budget, as well as the difference between what the board requested from the county and what the board received. As I shared with you 2 weeks ago, we've been making a lot of cuts since 2008, 2009. And we did everything during that period of time of the Great Recession to mitigate the impact on the schools. That being said, about 94% of our funding goes straight to the schools. So any type of cut that's of significance, and we consider an adjustment, a $17.5 million gap to be significant, is going to have some impact on the district. We had extensive review by the superintendent and leadership members. We met, Dr. Merrill and I met extensively with the Division of Principals to get their feedback. We came to the conclusion there are no easy answers, but we arrived at what we presented to you 2 weeks ago. And I'm going to run through that very quickly before we turn it over to the board for discussion. And I will again remind, with the exception of the business cases you see on the next couple slides, all other business cases in the board's proposed budget would remain intact with our recommendations. The first proposal was to freeze central office vacancies for a period of 90 days. We believe that will generate $1 million in savings in lapsed salaries. Basically, if a central service position becomes vacant, we would not allow it to be posted for 90 days, which really means it would be vacant more than 90 days because there'd be the posting, recruiting, hiring time. We had this in place during the Great Recession. We were able to lift it, but we're proposing putting it back in place. We would have a process if we consider there to be a mission-critical position to request a waiver to this freeze. But that was our first recommendation. Second recommendation was a revision by Mr. Winters on what our indirect revenue budget will be, and that was an increase of $700,000. And that was based on looking at an assessment at the end of the year of what indirect revenues were for the fiscal year that just ended. Next recommendation was to reduce central services contracted budgets by $2 million. We would push that out. Basically, each chief would receive their pro rata share of that and then make decisions within their respective divisions about how to implement that, again, mitigating the impact on our business. The $200,000 state funding reduction for transportation, we would direct the transportation department to absorb. So basically, they would have to find a way to cut their budget by $200,000. Next recommendation was to remove the new business case for instructional technology facilitators. That was $843,000. The next recommendation was to remove the new business case for middle school performing and visual arts. That was 75 months of employment. That is not in place now, so that was new at a value of $400,000. Next, removing the program continuity business case for Title II, which indirectly impacts professional development. That business case pulled staff off of Title II funding so we could free up Title II funding for professional development. And we requested local funding effectively to cover those staff. It was a business continuity case. But by pulling that effectively, our recommendation is to retain the staff, but we'll have $1.1 million less for professional development. Two last ones on this slide. Repurposing of DSSF funding, $1 million, and adjusting the academics allotments based upon actual allotment by $229,000. Flipping slides, next, custodial service reduction. We are currently providing after-school cleaning services 3 days a week, and the recommendation was to reduce that by 1 day a week. The savings there, $3.6 million. A recommendation to adjust all buildings, not just schools, central office buildings as well. Cooling and heating set points by 1 degree. The estimated savings there, just over $400,000. A decrease in the instructional supply formula for students. It's currently $71.04. The recommendation would bring it down to $68, creating a savings of $481,000. Next, changing the elementary and middle school teacher ADM formulas by 0.3 and 0.15 respectively. 0.3 for the elementaries, 0.15 for the middles. 5 middle schools would lose 10 months of employment, one 10-month position. 19 elementary schools would lose 10 MOEs, and the K-8 Hilburn Academy would lose one 10-month position. Savings there, $2.7 million. And then finally, we recommended an increase to the amount of fund balance appropriated to balance the budget from $7 million, which is in the board's proposed budget, up to $10 million. As I shared with you 2 weeks ago, even at that level, we are still on track, albeit not at the same rate, to reduce the amount of fund balance used to balance the budget year by year. I'll also point out tonight that if this is the board's desire to leave that additional $3 million in, at the appropriate time, we'll ask the board to waive their policy because that $10 million would be over 50% of the ending balance as of June 30, 2015. We realize that these recommended adjustments impact our schools. They impact our resources that directly support the schools. That being said, the recommended adjustments also allow us to provide that additional 1.5% increase for our support staff, and they allow us to, with the exception of the business cases that were included in the adjustments, fund every other business case in the board's proposed budget. And with that, be glad to answer any questions, and then we're prepared to turn it over to the board for their discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Nieder. Not an easy task to do, but very glad to see still aligned with our human capital of at least maintaining the increase for our support staff. Any questions from board members? Kevin, Mr. Field?
In terms of the ADM reduction, I guess I'm concerned about the year-rounds that have already opened. Were they given advance notice to hold back enough to cover what that reduction would be, or do we have risk of some schools losing positions?
To answer your question, no, we are not at risk, and yes, we did give them advance notice to hold back. And we did, granted, we've not reached our allotment reconciliation process yet for the year-rounds, and obviously not for the traditionals, where we look at actual student counts as opposed to projected, because their allotments are based on projected, not actual. But we looked at I said it was 5 middle and 19 elementary. Ms. Moore had the area superintendents reach out to those schools that would be impacted, and it's my understanding that they all had a reserve and would not be impacted with.
Thank you.
They'd be let me clarify if I could. Yes, they'll be impacted by a reduction of resource. It will not impact an individual teacher.
Yeah, thank you.
Given our movement to have more instruction based on technology and the expectation from some outside the school district that that is the godsend of how to save money in the future, when it isn't. I haven't seen anything that actually says it's less expensive. I know that the business case was to add an instructional technology facilitator in many of our schools. And my understanding is that position would be one that would, maybe I need some input, would be a position that would work alongside teacher to help them better utilize technology in their instruction. That would be support for the technology infrastructure within the building, that would help identify different planning opportunities to use technology in the classroom. What happens without that position? Does that work get done? Does it get dumped on the media specialist? Where does that work get done if we don't have these positions?
Okay, let me answer that in multiple parts. First, the positions. Not all schools have them. We initially proposed, I think it was a 3-year phase-in of this.
Correct, I believe so.
And I believe we've gone through a couple phases, and it's turned into a 5 or 6-year phase-in. They're not, I want to clarify, they're not full-time positions in each school. They are half-time positions. And it's to the work that they are designed to do more to the former and end of what you shared as far as assisting instructional staff in the schools with using technology in the classroom. Some from a support perspective, but as far as supporting infrastructure, our Central Technology Services Department provides a lot of that. Yes, maybe they do some initial troubleshooting in the school, but the primary purpose is to work from an instructional perspective. How are these other schools, and I may ask Ms. Moore if she's in the room to come up, she wants to add to this. How do schools that don't have this position function? They may have designated an individual, whether it's an IRT or they've converted months of employment for effectively the same position. We do have schools that do that.
Yep.
And Kathy, I'm going to let you.
That's fine. Some schools fund an ITF out of their existing resources if it's not provided by the school district. Some schools may have an IRT that has some capacity in this arena that's providing that support. Some schools are using a technology assistant, which is not a certified teacher level position, to provide some of this support. We have some capacity built in all of our schools through the work that was done with Teacher Leader Corps over the last 3 years. And so this was about embedding that support directly in schools and broadening it. We don't have good answers for how they make it work. There are always some teachers on staff that may be more tech savvy than others that help provide support and become a resource in the school. It's just not a designated resource whose responsibility is to provide that support. They're doing it on top of their other duties, as you said.
So the business case was to allow people who've got a full-time job to be more focused on that, as opposed to having to spread themselves out across responsibilities that aren't part of their core responsibility.
Well, so let me just make a couple of adjustments. It is the positions were half-time positions at schools, and there is a particular certification on your teaching license that's associated with this work. So those folks have a specific background in supporting teachers with how to integrate technology and support appropriate use of technology as a tool within the classroom. And that would be, for that half-time position, a focus of their work in the school that day.
So my comments are not meant to say that of the tough decisions, this isn't one that should be made, but simply to say that we've moved down a path in terms of attempting to provide this resource to the schools because we know that it's necessary, and this is a very difficult case to pull, A, because of what it promised, but B, because it's prolonging the agony of getting us to where we're where we should be. I mean, we're just way behind in terms of effective use of and helping our teachers be more successful using technology, and because that's where the kids are coming. So I just want to kind of, in a very non-perfect way, so just say this was a great business case. I appreciate staff having put it in the budget. We do have some of these tools, some of these positions in schools where they're being effective, and to not be able to expand this is a significant hurt. And I have to, before I leave, I have to say I'm equally concerned about not being able to reinstitute the arts and program in middle schools that were, for various reasons, curtailed over the last several years. Both of those, I think, are key issues. I don't know. I don't have an alternative of where to find $1.2 million to not make those cuts. I want the public to understand that these are significant instructional impacts that we're having to deal with.
Mr. Nieder, I wanted to go back to your second or third slide on the employee benefit contribution rate. You might understand then from the second part of that, the end of the slide, that we did find some additional funding. Fines and forfeitures were up, some carryover. So we found some more money, but it's being eaten up by the contribution rate increases. Is that correct?
Yes, and I should say we do not have this funding yet.
Okay.
But based
We're
upon,
anticipating that we're going to be able to balance it out. But that's the frustration to me, that it looks like we might have some additional revenues, but it looks like we need to set it aside for this. So we have to go on with the rest of the cuts.
Any other board questions or comments for Mr. Nieder? Mr. Hill? Oh. Okay, Dr. Mark.
Well, I'll just quickly add to Mr. Fletcher's comments. We're making up a lot of the gap with our students. Our students do an amazing amount of development and implementation and making our technology work, spoken as a parent of one who does major work. And unfortunately, whether you're talking about technology, whether you're talking about, just simple supplies, the job of an educator is you got to get the job done. You find a way to do it. It's in this political world, I run into people who have lots of expense accounts. We in the education world, our expense account is our own wallet. And we go out and we buy the supplies to make it happen. And that's what our teachers are doing every day. That's why teachers are helping other teachers. That's why students are doing what they do. It works because people have a passion and commitment. But as a community, I think it is, it's sending the wrong message for sure. If it's not even unexcusable as a business practice to depend on the passion and goodwill to carry out what I would argue is the national security risk for our nation, and that is the education of our youth. I'll stop there.
A couple points. One I wanted to make for Chair Benton. Pardon me, he's not here. I believe he sent a note to Mr. Nieder with some questions, and I kind of bought into one of them. No pun intended. Instead of reducing cleaning to 2 days a week, I think Chair Benton asked something about the cost of every other day, which would be 2 days a week, every other week, and still, I hope, keep the rooms clean. I still feel pretty strongly about that as far as the level and quality of teaching and learning that goes on in a school. That's one question. The second kind of piggybacks a little bit on what Mr. Fletcher said. Yeah, as a former social studies teacher, I can work wonders with a multiple choice test. Where was the dotted line? Is there a dotted line maybe with what just made the cut and what didn't make the cut? Because as a board, I spent a little while going through this the other day, page by page, trying to figure out where we might make some suggestions to recoup maybe this business model we could do without or something. It's staff's done again an awesome job with this, but where is there a dotted line somewhere? If as a board we say, hey, there's $2 million we want for this, whatever it may be, what are some options that we have, or would you guys not really be happy sharing kind of where the dotted line is?
No.
Is there a dotted line?
We'll be glad to speak to that. Your first question and Mr. Benton's question about what would it cost to go to basically 5 days every 2 weeks as opposed to 4 days every 2 weeks. It's pretty simple math. If the savings from cutting a day a week is $3.6 million, the cost is half of that, or $1.8 million. So if the board directed the superintendent and staff to say, we want to consider 5 days every 2 weeks, then with the other recommendations untouched, we would need to find $1.8 million. To the second part of your question, Mr. Hill, I will share with you some of the other things the superintendent and staff looked at as options. And these were discussed with the Division of Principals as well as leadership. We looked at eliminating transportation for grandfathered choice students. Those were students who were assigned to school during the choice assignment plan who were grandfathered. Many of them live in outlying areas and are isolated, so we may be going over to this part of the county to pick up 1 or 2 students and then coming all the way back. Our estimated savings by eliminating that, we did not recommend it, and we are not recommending it, would be $2.4 million. Now, those are going to work their way out of the system in another couple years, but our estimate for the annual savings by eliminating that, $2.4 million of operating cost. We looked at reducing the number of coordinating teachers and coaches. That could be whatever number it needs to be depending on how deep it goes. keeping in mind that these are some of our more experienced individuals. And by design, we want those individuals working with our teachers in the classroom to share their experience and wisdom. So they're more highly paid. So they would be more than the typical $55,000, $60,000 a year teacher when you include benefits. We looked at cutting funding for professional development. We looked at a 5% cut. We did not recommend it. 5% would yield almost $500,000. We looked at changing the teacher formula for elementary school specials, music, arts, PE, and adjusting it by one student. We did not recommend it. That one change would yield almost $2 million of savings, $1.9 million. We looked at postponing the second-year phase-in to the revision of the extra duty schedule. That was something the board approved last year as a 5-year plan. It was included in both the superintendent's proposed budget and the board's proposed budget. We looked at that long and hard, and we rethought through the conversations that everyone had a year ago about how that schedule, with a few exceptions, went back to the late 1980s. And it was one of those situations where more important things will kick the can down the road. More important things will kick the can down the road. Well, it turned into decades of that. And so we feel it's important not to put that out there, and we did not recommend it. We looked at eliminating one of the business cases for the East Wake High School redesign. We had made a commitment to it. We did not recommend it. That would have yielded savings of $725,000. We looked at charging fees for athletic events, student fees, participating fees, yes, not attendance fees, and also the same for extracurricular activities. We did not recommend it. We had an estimate of generating $1.2 million of revenues from that. We looked at the business case that had funding for, I believe, 2 new magnet schools and funding for theme changes at magnet schools. We did not recommend it. That would have yielded savings of almost $1 million, $927,000. We looked at eliminating after-school activity buses. That would have yielded just over $500,000. We also looked at which students that would highly impact, which populations. We didn't like the answer, and we did not recommend it. We looked at increasing the employer dental premium. Our employees currently pay, Mr. Winter, $6 a month. We looked at increasing it unless we had a significant increase to it. It was not going to generate much money. Was it $1 generated $90,000? We went from $6 a month to $7 a month. It would generate less than $100,000. We did not feel at this point, with what our employees have been through since the Great Recession, putting this on their backs was appropriate. We did not recommend it. We looked at changing the teaching assistant formula. We didn't look at any particular thing, but as soon as we had the conversation about those resources, we took it right back off the table. We did not recommend it. And finally, one of the things we looked at was not providing the recommended additional 1.5% compensation change for support staff, or recommending a lower amount, say 0.5% or 1%. And again, the cost of that, as you saw from a slide earlier in the presentation, or the savings from that, if fully withdrawn, would have been almost $3 million. But again, we did not recommend that. Those are the primary areas we looked at as alternatives. You're welcome.
Thank you. Indeed, no easy answer. Any cut to make up $17.5 million gap is going to severely hurt our students. And so thank you and the staff for going through this, and for our board members to keep kind of shuffling through the book, hoping to find some easy answers, but they don't exist, to Mr. Hill's point. Any other discussion?
If I may, I think it's important to show that the balancing and cutting was distributed across multiple areas, both in schools and in central locations and on contracts. Some media coverage would lead folks to conclude there were only two things that were being reduced, the temperature and custodial support. There were 2 slides here of lists of things, and to the concept of the dotted line, if you will, there's a dotted line on every one of the items we're cutting, and that's where we stopped on each dotted line. But 11, 12 different areas to spread it out across, in effect, to try and distribute the pain, basically. And there was no way we could do so at this point after years of reductions and completely insulate schools and classrooms. I mean, the proverbial down to the bone is not a metaphor used lightly, and I think we're in that case. So just wanted to reemphasize the fact it's a distribution of cuts. So thank you.
Thank you for noting the distribution across our school system to make sure that we are relaying that correctly to the public, that we are indeed spreading the pain that we're feeling as a system.
Well, I'd just like to reflect and say thanks again to staff. You know, when I look at these things, do try to read the budgets, but recognize our role as a governing board, not a managing board. And herein, I want to say, as a part of that governing board, that I respect and value the insight of the staff. I think you guys have done an admirable job. And from a governing perspective, you know, from a managing perspective, yes, any of us might have made a few different decisions here or there. From a governing perspective, I have absolutely no question that you, the staff, have done exactly what you should do and brought a reasonable strategy for the whole organization of Wake County Schools to move forward. And in that light, as a governing board member, I support your recommendations. Thank you.
Mr. Nieder, our next steps?
Next steps, some of that I would turn back to the board. There are 2 board members who are not present tonight who have not had the opportunity to have any input. So we certainly value that, including the board chair.
Yes.
In a normal circumstance, if everyone had been in here, we would have recommended coming to your meeting on the 16th, 2 weeks from now, requesting the board waive board policy, because within the recommendations that are on the table at this point, more than 50% of the unassigned fund balance would be appropriated, and adopting or approving a recommended budget. But I will defer to the vice chair and perhaps the superintendent on protocol, given that 2 board members are missing.
The chair and I did not speak about this, but I do appreciate you noting that we do have 2 board members, and you did bring back one of the answers to our chair's question. So I would, in my opinion, prefer for it to come back when the chair is here and Ms. Felton, so that they can also weigh in and have the opportunity before we waive board policy.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nieder. And staff for all of your work on this. Is there a motion to approve the consent items?
Motion to approve consent.
Second.
All in favor, please note by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Is there a motion to approve the HR items discussed in closed session?
Madam Vice Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the administrative recommendations that were made in closed.
As well as all the employment.
The appointments, Jeff.
Second.
All in favor, please note by saying
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. Now, another motion to go into closed session?
Motion to return to closed session per the items that were previously stated.
Second.
All in favor, please note by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. We will now go back into closed session.